I watched Madison stumble down the stairs in my Louboutins, the red soles flashing like warning lights as she clutched the railing. The heels were too big for her, but she'd stuffed tissue paper in the toes and refused to take them off. "These are perfect," she said, twirling in front of the mirror. "Everyone's going to die when they see me." I said nothing. I just stood there in my simple black flats, the ones I'd bought at Target for $20, and smiled. Because I knew something Madison didn't. I knew exactly what was going to happen tonight. I'd lived this night before. The first time around, I'd been the one in those heels. I'd been the one who thought I was going to have the perfect prom, and I'd been the one who ended up humiliated, broken, and eventually dead at 23, alone in a studio apartment, wondering where everything had gone so wrong. But that was my first life. This time, I was going to do things differently. "Are you sure you don't want to borrow something nicer?" my mother asked, barely glancing at me as she adjusted Madison's diamond necklace. The necklace that had been my grandmother's, the one that was supposed to come to me as the eldest daughter. "You look so plain." Plain. That was her favorite word for me. Plain face, plain hair, plain personality. Madison was the beautiful one, the talented one, the one worth investing in. I was just the practice child, the rough draft before the masterpiece. "I'm sure," I said, smoothing down my simple black dress. It was elegant in its simplicity, a stark contrast to Madison's poofy pink monstrosity that looked like it had exploded out of a cotton candy machine. But I knew from experience that less was more. The first time around, I'd worn a gorgeous emerald gown that had cost me 6 months of savings from my part-time job. Madison had accidentally spilled red wine on it an hour before prom, forcing me to wear one of her cast-offs instead. This time, I'd bought something that couldn't be ruined. Something that would let me move freely. Something that would let me disappear into the background until the exact moment I needed to shine. "Well, you're certainly making it easy for Madison to be prom queen," my father said, walking into the room with his camera. He didn't even look at me. He never did. All his attention, all his pride, all his love, it all went to Madison. I'd spent 18 years trying to earn his approval, straight A's while Madison barely scraped by with C's. Captain of the debate team while Madison got kicked out of drama club for missing too many rehearsals. Full scholarship to Northwestern while Madison was still waiting to hear back from community colleges. None of it mattered. She was beautiful, and I was plain. In my family, that was the only currency that counted. The doorbell rang, and Madison squealed, "That's Tyler!" She rushed toward the door, wobbling dangerously in my heels. Tyler Chen, the quarterback, the prom king, the boy I'd been in love with since freshman year. The boy who'd asked me to prom 3 weeks ago, then mysteriously changed his mind and asked Madison instead. I knew why now. I'd died with the knowledge, and I'd been reborn with it burning in my chest like a hot coal. I watched as Tyler walked in, his eyes widening when he saw Madison. "You look amazing," he said, and she beamed. My mother practically glowed with pride. My father snapped photo after photo. No one looked at me. No one except Jake Morrison, who'd arrived at the same time. He was my date. The consolation prize, the backup plan. The weird, quiet kid who did photography for the school paper and barely talked to anyone. In my first life, I'd been so devastated about Tyler that I'd barely acknowledged Jake's existence that night. I'd spent the entire prom watching Tyler and Madison crying in the bathroom, leaving early. I'd never realized that Jake had spent the entire night watching me with concerned eyes, trying to make me laugh, attempting to salvage what should have been a magical evening. This time, I looked at him, really looked at him. His suit was a little too big, probably borrowed or thrifted, but he'd made an effort. His dark hair was neatly combed and his brown eyes were kind. He held out a simple corsage. White roses, my favorite, though I'd never told him that. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Thank you," I replied, and I meant it. "You look great, too." His eyes widened slightly, like he hadn't expected me to actually look at him, to see him. Then he smiled, and it transformed his whole face. The limo ride was torture, but I'd expected that. Madison and Tyler made out in one corner while my mother's words echoed in my head. "Make sure you don't upstage your sister tonight. It's her night to shine." As if I'd ever been allowed to shine in this family. as if my entire existence hadn't been carefully managed to ensure I never outshone Madison's mediocre glow. Jakes tried to make conversation, pointing out interesting buildings, asking about my plans for college. I answered politely, but my mind was elsewhere. I was reviewing my plan, checking off mental boxes, making sure everything was in place. In my first life, I hadn't known about the plan. I hadn't known that Madison had been systematically sabotaging me for years, stealing my homework and claiming it as her own, spreading rumors about me at school, intercepting emails from colleges, and the biggest betrayal of all, she'd stolen my portfolio, the one I'd spent 3 years building for my art school applications, and submitted it under her own name. I'd found out too late. After Northwestern had rescinded my scholarship because Madison had sent them an email from my account, declining their offer. After I'd had to settle for state school instead. After I'd graduated with debt and no prospects because Madison had poisoned my reputation with every internship connection I'd made. I'd watched her coast through life on my stolen achievements while I struggled to survive. And when I'd finally confronted her, when I'd finally found proof of everything she'd done, she'd just laughed. "Who's going to believe you?" she'd said. "Mom and Dad certainly won't. You're just the jealous older sister who can't handle that I'm more successful than you." She'd been right. When I tried to tell our parents, they'd accused me of being delusional. When I'd tried to expose her publicly, she'd played the victim so perfectly that I'd ended up looking like the villain. My friends had abandoned me, my boyfriend had left me, my career had crumbled, and then, one day, after years of fighting and failing, I'd just given up. I'd stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped trying, and one morning, I hadn't woken up, until I did. In my 17-year-old body, 1 year ago, with all my memories intact and a second chance to stop my sister before she destroyed me. I'd spent that year being careful, being patient, not trying to change too much because I needed Madison to feel confident, to feel like she was winning. I needed her to follow the same path, make the same choices, because I knew where that path led, and this time, I was going to be there to watch her fall. We arrived at the hotel where prom was being held, and I stepped out of the limo in my simple flats, my plain black dress, my understated everything. Madison emerged like a pink cupcake explosion, tottering in my heels, my grandmother's diamonds catching the light. Everyone's attention immediately went to her. Perfect. Jake offered me his arm, and I took it. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "You seem different tonight." "I'm fine," I said. "Better than fine, actually. Tonight's going to be interesting." He gave me a curious look but didn't push. That was one of the things I'd come to appreciate about Jake in this second life. He respected boundaries, he paid attention, he saw things other people missed. Inside, the ballroom was decorated in silver and blue, the theme Midnight Dreams. In my first life, I'd thought it was beautiful. Now, I just saw it as the stage for Madison's downfall. The first hour passed uneventfully. Madison held court at a table surrounded by the popular girls, showing off her dress, her date, her everything. I sat with Jake and a few other quiet kids from the journalism club, actually enjoying their company this time. They were smart and funny and kind, qualities I'd been too blinded by teenage social hierarchy to appreciate before. "You're different tonight," one of them, a girl named Sarah, said. "More present." "I decided to stop caring about things that don't matter," I replied. "Like your sister?" I smiled. Exactly like my sister. At 8 o'clock, the prom king and queen ceremony began. I already knew who would win, Tyler and Madison, obviously. It had been practically predetermined. Madison had been campaigning for months, and Tyler's status as quarterback made him a shoo-in. But I also knew what Madison didn't, that her reign was going to be very, very short. They announced the winners, and Madison shrieked with joy, throwing her arms around Tyler. She stumbled up to the stage in my heels, nearly falling twice. The crown was placed on her head, and she gave a speech about how she was so honored and how she wanted to thank everyone who supported her. I clapped politely. Beside me, Jake was watching her with a strange expression. "She's wearing your heels," he said quietly. I looked at him in surprise. "How did you know?" "I pay attention," he said simply. "I've seen you wear them before. They fit you, they don't fit her." Something warm bloomed in my chest. Someone had noticed. Someone had seen. She borrowed them, I said. I didn't mind. That was a lie. I'd minded very much the first time. I'd cried about it, actually, because those heels had been a gift to myself. Something I'd saved up for, something that made me feel confident and beautiful. And Madison had just taken them the way she took everything. This time, I'd offered them, because I knew what was about to happen. The music started, and Madison and Tyler had their prom king and queen dance. She was radiant, glowing, perfect. Everyone watched them with admiration and envy. And then, exactly at 8:47 p.m., I'd checked the timestamp 100 times in my memories. It happened. Madison's heel caught on the hem of her dress. In my first life, I'd been the one wearing those heels, and I'd been the one who'd fallen during the Queen's dance. Madison had made sure my dress was just a little too long, that the heels were just a little too high. I'd tumbled in front of the entire school, my dress flying up, my dignity shattered. Tyler had laughed. Madison had laughed. Everyone had laughed. This time, it was Madison who fell. Hard. The crack of her ankle breaking was audible even over the music. Her scream echoed through the ballroom. The music stopped. Everyone rushed forward. I stayed in my seat. Jake looked at me. Aren't you going to help her? She's got plenty of help, I said calmly. She doesn't need me. And it was true. Our mother was already pushing through the crowd. Our father was calling 911. Tyler was hovering uselessly. Madison was sobbing, her ankle bent at an unnatural angle, the crown askew on her head. How did you know? Jake asked suddenly. Know what? That she was going to fall. You gave her those heels. You wore flats, you knew. I looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide how much to tell him. In my first life, Jake had tried to help me, and I'd pushed him away. He'd been a good person, and I'd been too wrapped up in my own misery to notice. Let's just say I had a feeling, I said finally. Those heels were always a little too big for her. She should have worn her own shoes. The paramedics arrived and took Madison away. My parents went with her, of course. They didn't even glance back at me. I was left at prom without a ride, but I didn't care. Jake offered to share his friend's car, and I accepted. But prom wasn't over. The teachers decided to continue, not wanting to ruin everyone else's night. A new song started playing, and people slowly returned to dancing. Do you want to dance? Jake asked. I looked at him, really looked at him. In my first life, I'd spent this whole night mourning what I'd lost with Tyler. I'd never realized that Jake had been offering me something new, something potentially better. Yes, I said, I'd like that. We danced, and it was nice. Easy. He didn't try to grope me or show off. He just moved with the music and made quiet jokes that actually made me laugh. For the first time in either of my lives, I enjoyed prom. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Madison's ankle is broken. We're at the hospital. You need to find your own ride home. We'll talk about this tomorrow. About what? About how Madison had borrowed my two big heels against my advice. About how she'd insisted on wearing them despite my warnings. I'd covered my bases carefully, but I knew what she really meant. She'd find a way to blame me anyway. She always did. Jake drove me home around 11. We sat in his car outside my house for a few minutes, neither of us quite ready for the night to end. Thank you, I said. For tonight, for being kind. You don't have to thank me for basic human decency, he said, but he was smiling. In my family, basic human decency is pretty rare. His smile faded. I've noticed. The way they treat you, it's not right. I shrugged. It is what it is. Doesn't mean it should be. We sat in silence for another moment. Then Jake reached into his bag and pulled out his camera. I took some photos tonight, wanted to see? He showed me, scrolling through images of the prom. There were a few of Madison and Tyler, some of the decorations, some candid shots of our classmates. And then, that's me, I said, staring at the screen. Yeah. It was a photo of me sitting at our table, laughing at something Sarah had said. The lighting was perfect, catching the genuine joy on my face. I looked beautiful. Not magazine beautiful like Madison, but real beautiful. Happy beautiful. Can I have a copy? I asked. Already emailed it to you, he said, along with a few others. I looked at him. Thank you, Jake. Really? Anytime. I went inside and the house was empty and quiet. I went up to my room, changed into pajamas, and lay down on my bed. Madison's broken ankle was unfortunate, but it was just the beginning. Just the first crack in the perfect facade she'd built, because I remembered what came next. Let me tell you about my first life, about the systematic way Madison had destroyed me. It had started small when we were kids. She'd break my toys and blame me. She'd eat the last cookie and say I'd eaten it. She'd tell our parents lies about me, that I'd hit her, that I'd stolen from her, that I'd said terrible things. And they'd always believed her because she was younger, because she was their favorite, because her tears were prettier than mine. As we got older, it escalated. In middle school, she'd stolen my diary and read excerpts out loud to her friends. In freshman year, she'd started a rumor that I'd slept with a teacher. In sophomore year, she'd convinced my boyfriend that I'd been cheating on him. And in junior year, she'd found my portfolio. I'd been building it since freshman year: paintings, drawings, digital art, photographs. I was good, really good. Good enough that my art teacher had told me I could get into RISD or Pratt. Good enough that I'd started to believe in myself, to think maybe I could escape this house and this family and make something of my life. Madison couldn't have that. She'd always needed to be the special one, the talented one. So, she'd taken my portfolio, copied it, and submitted it to every art school I'd been planning to apply to, under her name. When I'd found out, when I'd confronted her, she'd just smiled. Prove it, she'd said. Prove they're yours and not mine. And I couldn't. Because I'd been stupid enough to not date my work, to not photograph my process, to assume I was safe in my own home. She'd taken the originals. She'd deleted the files from my computer. She'd even taken my sketchbooks. I'd tried to tell my parents. My mother had slapped me for lying about my sister. My father had called me jealous and delusional. They'd taken away my art supplies, saying I clearly couldn't be trusted with them if I was going to be crazy and accusatory. So I'd given up on art school. I'd accepted the academic scholarship to Northwestern instead, thinking at least I could escape, at least I could start over. But Madison hadn't been done with me. That summer before college, she'd systematically gone through my email and sabotaged me. She'd declined my scholarship. She'd sent horrible messages to my future roommate who'd requested a different room. She'd unsubscribed me from all the important college mailing lists so I'd missed crucial deadlines. By the time I'd discovered what she'd done, it was too late. Northwestern had given my scholarship to someone else. I'd had to scramble to find another school, ended up at a state school with minimal aid, drowning in debt. And through it all, Madison had gone to art school on my work. She'd gotten praise, opportunities, gallery showings, all with my paintings, my vision, my soul on display under her name. The first time around, I'd broken. I'd spent my 20s trying to rebuild, trying to prove myself, but I was always starting from scratch, while Madison coasted on foundations I'd built. She'd gotten the connections, the reputation, the career. I'd gotten nothing but debt and exhaustion and the slow, grinding knowledge that I'd been robbed of my life. This time was going to be different. The broken ankle was just the beginning, just like before. But what Madison didn't know, what no one knew, was that I'd learned from my first life. I'd learned to be patient. I'd learned to plan. And I'd learned that the best revenge was letting Madison destroy herself while I stood back and watched. The next morning, I woke to shouting downstairs. I got dressed and went down to find my mother in the kitchen, her face red with anger. "This is your fault," she said the moment she saw me. "My fault that Madison borrowed my heels? You should have told her they were too big." "I did. She insisted on wearing them." "You should have insisted harder." I just looked at her. In my first life, this would have made me cry. I would have apologized even though I'd done nothing wrong. I would have spent the day feeling guilty and terrible. This time, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "Madison is 18, I said calmly. "She made her own choice. I'm sorry she got hurt, but it's not my responsibility to manage her decisions." My mother's face turned purple. "How dare you? I have to go, I said, checking my phone. Jake's picking me up. We're going to finish a project for journalism. That was a lie. Jake and I were actually going to the hospital to visit Madison, though not for the reasons my mother would assume. I left before she could respond, grabbing a granola bar on my way out. Jake's car was already in the driveway. I slid into the passenger seat and he handed me a coffee. You remembered my order? I said, surprised. You mentioned it once. I pay attention. That warmth in my chest again. Someone who paid attention. Someone who remembered. Someone who cared. We drove to the hospital in comfortable silence. I was reviewing my plan, making sure everything was in order. The broken ankle had been an accident, or at least it would look like one. But what came next wasn't an accident at all. In my first life, I'd discovered Madison's secrets too late to do anything about them. But this time, I'd had a year to investigate, to document, to build an airtight case. I knew about the plagiarism. I knew about the stolen portfolio. I knew about the fake accounts she'd used to spread rumors. I knew about the emails she'd sent from my account. I knew everything, and I'd been carefully, methodically gathering proof. We arrived at the hospital and made our way to Madison's room. She was lying in bed, her leg in a cast, looking miserable. Tyler was there, as was my mother. My father had gone to work. Even Madison's broken ankle wasn't enough to make him miss a day at the office. Oh, good, you're here, my mother said when she saw me. Madison needs someone to take notes in her classes this week. You'll do it. Not a question, a command. No, I said. Everyone stared at me. No, my mother repeated. No, I have my own classes. Madison can get notes from her friends or ask her teachers for extensions. But you're her sister, and she's an adult who can handle her own academic responsibilities. Madison started crying. Why are you being so mean to me? I'm hurt. Tyler glared at me. What's your problem? She just asked for help. I looked at Madison, really looked at her. She was good at this. The tears, the hurt expression, the victim act. She'd been perfecting it for 18 years. You're right, I said calmly. You're hurt, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm not responsible for your classes. I'm sure your friends will help you out. I turned to leave, and Jake followed me. Behind us, I could hear Madison sobbing and my mother cursing me. I didn't care. In the hallway, Jake stopped me. What was that about? Me not being a doormat anymore. He studied my face. Good, you shouldn't be. We drove to school and I went to my classes like normal. At lunch, Sarah found me in the cafeteria. Oh my God, have you seen the video? She asked. What video? She pulled out her phone and showed me. Someone had filmed Madison's fall at prom and posted it online. It had been viewed thousands of times, with comments ranging from sympathetic to mocking. I watched it once, feeling nothing but that same cold satisfaction. That's terrible, I said, in the tone of someone who didn't think it was terrible at all. Sarah gave me a knowing look. She borrowed your heels, didn't she? She insisted on them. And you let her, knowing they didn't fit. I met her eyes. I told her they were too big. She's an adult. She made her choice. Sarah smiled slowly. You know what? Good for you. She's always been kind of awful to you. You noticed? Everyone notices. Most people just don't say anything because she's popular. It was validating, hearing someone else acknowledge what I'd always known, that Madison was cruel, that the way she treated me wasn't normal or acceptable, that people saw it, even if they didn't intervene. The week passed. Madison stayed home from school, milking her injury for all it was worth. My mother called me selfish and uncaring. My father said I was jealous. I ignored them all and focused on my classes, my photography project with Jake, my plan. Because the broken ankle was just the opening act. The real show was about to begin. 3 weeks after prom, college acceptance letters started arriving. I got mine first. Northwestern, full academic scholarship, exactly as I'd received in my first life. I'd made sure Madison couldn't sabotage me this time by using a P.O. box she didn't know about and setting up two-factor authentication on all my accounts. Madison's letters came next. Rejections, all of them. Every art school she'd applied to, under her own name this time, with her own mediocre work, had turned her down. She was devastated. She locked herself in her room and cried for days. My mother blamed me somehow, as if I'd personally ruined Madison's chances. "You're going to Northwestern," she said. "You should give up your spot and let Madison have it." I stared at her. "That's not how college admissions work. You could defer, tell them you've had a family emergency." "No. She's your sister. And I earned my scholarship. Madison can go to community college." My mother actually tried to slap me again, but I caught her wrist. I was taller than her now, stronger, and I was done being her punching bag. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't ever try to hit me again." We stared at each other for a long moment. Then she wrenched her hand away and stormed out. I stood there, my heart pounding, feeling powerful for the first time in my life. But the real satisfaction came a week later, when I received an email from RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, one of the most prestigious art schools in the country. They wanted to meet with me about my portfolio, except I hadn't submitted a portfolio to RISD. Madison had. 3 years ago in my first life, she'd stolen my work and submitted it under her name. And she'd gotten in, had gotten a full ride, had launched her entire career on my stolen art. This time, I'd been waiting for her to do it again. I'd left my portfolio where she could find it, had made sure my computer was accessible, had given her every opportunity to take my work, and she had. Because Madison was nothing if not predictable. But this time, I had proof. I had dated photos of my process. I had video of me creating the pieces. I had my original sketches, my references, my everything. And I'd been documenting every time Madison accessed my computer, every file she'd copied. I responded to RISD's email, thanking them for their interest, and informing them that there had been some confusion about the application. I attached my documentation, hundreds of pages of proof that the portfolio they'd received under Madison's name was actually mine. Then I waited. 2 days later, RISD emailed back. They were very concerned about the plagiarism and would be launching an investigation. They asked if I'd be willing to speak with them. I said yes. The meeting was scheduled for the following week via video call. I spent the time preparing, organizing my evidence, practicing my presentation. Jake helped me, asking tough questions, making sure my case was airtight. "Why didn't you report this when it happened the first time?" he asked during one of our practice sessions. I froze. "What do you mean the first time?" He gave me a long, assessing look. "You keep talking about Madison's patterns of behavior like you've seen them before. You know exactly what she's going to do before she does it. And sometimes you say things like this time or last time. So either you're psychic or something else is going on." I stared at him, my heart racing. No one was supposed to know. No one was supposed to figure it out. "I'm not going to tell anyone," he said gently. "But I'd like to know the truth, if you're willing to share it." So I told him. Not everything, not about dying and being reborn, because that was too much. But I told him about my suspicions, about how I'd been documenting Madison's behavior, about how I'd set a trap and she'd walked right into it. "She's done this before," I said. "Stolen my things, sabotaged me, taken credit for my work. This time, I was ready for it." It was close enough to the truth that it felt honest, and far enough from the full truth that it felt safe. Jake nodded slowly. "Good. She deserves to face consequences." "You don't think I'm being vindictive?" "I think you're being strategic. There's a difference." The day of the RISD meeting arrived. I set up my laptop in my room, making sure the lighting was good and my evidence was organized. At exactly 2 p.m., 3 people appeared on my screen: the dean of admissions, the head of the art department, and a representative from student conduct. They were very professional, very serious. They asked me to walk them through my claims, to show them my evidence. I did, methodically presenting each piece of proof: the dated photos of my process, the videos of me painting, the original sketches, the metadata from the files showing when they were created and by whom, the security footage I'd captured of Madison accessing my computer and copying my files. It took 2 hours. When I was done, the 3 RISD representatives looked grimly satisfied. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention," the dean said. This is clearly a serious case of academic dishonesty. We'll be rejecting Ms. Madison's application and flagging her file for fraud. We'll also be reporting this to the other institutions she applied to. And, the art department head added, we'd like to offer you a place in our next incoming class with a full scholarship. Your work is exceptional, and your integrity is even more impressive. I thanked them, trying to keep the satisfaction off my face. After the call ended, I sat back in my chair and let myself smile. Madison's life was about to fall apart, just like mine had in my first life. Except this time, she deserved it. The consequences came swiftly. Within a week, every art school Madison had applied to received notice of her plagiarism. Her acceptances were rescinded. Her name was flagged in the college admission system. Even the community colleges started turning her down. My parents were furious. At me, of course, not at Madison for stealing. "How could you do this to your sister?" my mother screamed. "You've ruined her future." "She ruined her own future when she stole my work," I said calmly. "It's just a few paintings. You could have shared." Shared? She took them without permission, submitted them as her own, and committed fraud. That's not sharing, that's theft. Madison was sobbing in the corner, but her tears didn't move me anymore. I'd cried too many tears in my first life. I had none left to spare for her crocodile tears. My father tried a different approach. "Look, I know Madison made a mistake, but your sisters, family, can't you just drop the charges or whatever? Tell those schools it was a misunderstanding?" There are no charges to drop, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. Madison systematically stole my intellectual property and tried to build her future on my work. I'm not going to help her lie about that. "You're being vindictive." "I'm being honest. There's a difference." They tried everything. Guilt trips, threats, bribes. My father even offered to pay for me to go to whatever college I wanted if I'd just fix this with the art schools. I refused, because this wasn't about college for me, it was about justice, about making sure Madison faced consequences for once in her spoiled life. But I wasn't done. Not yet. See, in my first life, I'd discovered too late that Madison's plagiarism hadn't been limited to my art portfolio. She'd been stealing from me academically for years, copying my homework, my essays, my projects. She'd even hacked into my accounts to submit my work as her own. This time, I'd been documenting it all. Every time she'd copied my homework, I'd saved evidence. Every time she'd accessed my accounts, I'd recorded it. I'd been building a case for over a year, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it. That moment came when I received an email from Northwestern, congratulating me on my acceptance and mentioning that they'd been impressed by my essay about overcoming family adversity. Except I'd written that essay about dealing with Madison's abuse. I'd been honest and raw and vulnerable, pouring out years of pain onto the page. And apparently Madison had found it and submitted it to the schools she'd applied to, with minimal changes, just swapping her name for mine and our positions in the family. She'd literally stolen my trauma and tried to use it for her own gain. That was the final straw. I compiled everything. 4 years of documented plagiarism. Hundreds of instances of Madison copying my work, stealing my ideas, taking credit for my achievements. I organized it into a comprehensive report with timestamps, screenshots, video evidence, witness statements from classmates who'd seen Madison's pattern of behavior. Then I sent it to our high school principal. The meeting was called 2 days later. Me, Madison, our parents, the principal, the vice principal, and the head of guidance all crammed into the principal's office. Madison was pale, her hands shaking. She knew what was coming. Our parents were angry and defensive. I was calm. The principal laid out the evidence, years of plagiarism, academic dishonesty on a massive scale. Madison hadn't written a single original essay in 4 years. She'd copied all her major projects from me or from online sources. She'd even had other students do her homework in exchange for popularity points. "This is the most egregious case of academic dishonesty I've seen in 30 years of teaching," the principal said. "Ms. Madison, you're being expelled, effective immediately. Your diploma is being revoked. All your grades from the past 4 years are being invalidated, and we'll be reporting this to every college you've applied to." Madison started crying. My mother started shouting. My father started threatening lawsuits. I just sat there feeling that cold satisfaction settle deeper into my bones. "You can't do this," my mother screamed. "She's graduating in 2 months." "She's a cheater," the principal said flatly. "And she's been cheating for years. This behavior is inexcusable." "But what about her future?" "She should have thought of that before she decided to steal her sister's work." Madison turned to me, her face blotchy with tears. "How could you do this to me? I'm your sister." "And you've been sabotaging me for years?" I said calmly. "Stealing my work? Spreading rumors about me? Taking credit for my achievements? Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" "I never, don't lie. I have proof of everything. Every time you copied my homework, every time you accessed my accounts, every file you stole. I've been documenting it all for over a year." The color drained from her face. She knew I had her. "A year," my mother said. "You've been planning this for a year?" "I've been protecting myself for a year," I corrected. "I learned not to trust Madison, and I was right not to." The expulsion stood. Madison was kicked out of school, her diploma revoked, her college prospects obliterated. She'd have to get her GED and start over from scratch, if any college would even take her after the academic fraud on her record. My parents were apoplectic. They screamed at me, called me every name in the book, told me I'd destroyed my sister's life out of jealousy. "She destroyed her own life," I said. I just made sure everyone knew about it." That night, my father gave me an ultimatum. "Apologize to your sister and fix this, or get out of this house." I'd been waiting for this. I'd had my bags packed for weeks. "Fine," I said. "I'll leave." I called Jake, and he came to pick me up within 20 minutes. I loaded my bags into his car while my parents and Madison watched from the doorway. Madison was still crying. My mother was still cursing me. My father just looked disappointed, but then again, he always looked disappointed in me. "You're really leaving?" my mother said. "Just like that?" "Just like that." "Where will you go?" "Somewhere I'm actually wanted." I got in Jake's car and we drove away. I didn't look back. Jake had already talked to his parents, who'd agreed to let me stay in their guest room until I left for college. They were kind people, warm and welcoming in a way my own family had never been. They asked me questions about school and my plans and actually listened to my answers. They made me feel like I mattered. It was everything my own home had never been. Over the next few weeks, the fallout continued. The video of Madison's prom fall had gone viral, with over 1 million views. The plagiarism scandal had made local news. Madison's social media had been flooded with angry comments from people calling her a fraud and a thief. Her friends had abandoned her. Tyler had broken up with her. She'd become a pariah at school, or she would have been, if she was still allowed to attend. My mother called me repeatedly, alternating between begging me to come home and cursing me for ruining their lives. My father didn't call at all. I blocked them both. Jake's parents helped me apply for financial aid and scholarships. Turns out, when I wasn't being sabotaged by my family, I was eligible for a lot of support. I got grants, work study, additional scholarships. By the time everything was processed, I'd have enough to pay for Northwestern without taking on significant debt. I also accepted RISD's offer. I'd defer for a year, work and save money, then start art school with a full scholarship and a clean slate. Everything was falling into place. But there was one more thing I needed to do. In my first life, I'd learned about my grandmother, my father's mother, too late. She'd been wealthy, successful, and estranged from my father for decades after he'd chosen my mother over her warnings. Grandmother had tried to maintain a relationship with me and Madison when we were young, but my mother had refused to let her see us. Grandmother had died when I was 22, and I'd only found out about it months later. She'd left her entire estate to charity because she'd believed she had no family who cared about her. This time, I'd looked her up early. I'd found her address, her phone number, her email, and I'd been working up the courage to reach out. Finally, 2 weeks before graduation, my graduation since Madison's had been canceled, I called her. "Hello." Her voice was elderly but strong. Hi, this is this is your granddaughter, Claire. Silence. Then, Claire, David's daughter? Yes, I know it's been a long time, but I wanted to talk to you if that's okay. Oh, sweetheart. Her voice cracked. Of course it's okay. I've been waiting years to hear from you. We talked for 2 hours. I told her everything about Madison's abuse, about my parents' favoritism, about the plagiarism and the expulsion and how I'd finally stood up for myself. She listened to it all, occasionally making angry sounds when I described particularly egregious incidents. I tried to warn your father, she said, about your mother, but he wouldn't listen. I'm so sorry you've had to deal with this, Claire. You deserved better. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. I just, I wanted you to know I existed, that I wanted a relationship with you even if my parents didn't. Come visit me, she said immediately. Please, I live in Connecticut. It's not too far from you. Come for a weekend, or a week, or however long you want. So I did, the weekend after. Graduation, Jake drove me to Connecticut. My grandmother lived in a beautiful old Victorian house filled with books and art and warmth. She welcomed me with tears in her eyes and a hug that felt like coming home. We spent 3 days together, talking about everything. My plans for college, her career as a painter, the family history I'd never been told. She showed me her art studio and let me paint with her. She told me stories about my father as a boy, before he'd become the cold, distant man I knew. He used to be kind, she said. Creative, even. But your mother, she changed him, made him hard, made him value the wrong things. He chose her, I said. He did. And he's chosen her ever since. Even when it meant hurting you. I'm sorry for that, Claire. You deserved a father who protected you. On my last day there, my grandmother took me into her study and showed me her will. I'm 83 years old, she said. I won't be around forever, and I want you to know that I'm leaving everything to you. The house, my savings, my art collection, all of it. I stared at her. Everything? Everything. You're the only one who reached out. The only one who wanted a relationship with me. And from what you've told me, you're the only one who deserves it. What about Madison? Madison made her choices. She can live with the consequences. I hugged my grandmother, crying for the first time in this second life. But these were good tears. Healing tears. Graduation day arrived. I wore my cap and gown, walked across the stage, received my diploma. Jake and his parents were in the audience, cheering for me. My grandmother was there too, sitting in the front row with tears of pride in her eyes. My own parents weren't there. Madison wasn't there. They'd skipped it, either out of spite or shame. I didn't care. I had a new family now, one that actually loved me. After the ceremony, we all went out to dinner. Me, Jake, his parents, my grandmother. We laughed and celebrated and made plans for the future. My grandmother insisted on paying for everything, and when the bill came, she also handed me an envelope. For your college expenses, she said, and anything else you need. Inside was a check for $50,000. I tried to refuse it, but she wouldn't hear it. You're my granddaughter, she said firmly. Let me help you. So I accepted, with gratitude and love. The summer passed quickly. I worked at a local art gallery, building my portfolio and saving money. I spent weekends with my grandmother, learning to paint from her. I spent evenings with Jake, who was starting to feel less like a friend and more like something else entirely. One night in July, we were sitting on his porch watching the sunset. He'd been quiet all evening, and I'd learned to recognize when he had something on his mind. What is it? I asked. I've been thinking, he said slowly. About you and me. My heart started beating faster. Yeah. In another life, or maybe earlier in this one, I don't think you would have looked at me twice. I was the weird, quiet kid with the camera. You were dealing with your own stuff, but now I see you, and I think you see me. And I was wondering if maybe you'd want to try this, us? I looked at him, really looked at him. Jake, who'd been kind when I needed kindness, who'd paid attention when everyone else ignored me, who'd supported me without asking for anything in return, who'd seen me as a person, not as Madison's inferior sister. Yes, I said, I'd like that. He smiled and we kissed as the sun set behind us. It felt like a beginning. August came and I got a call from my mother. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Claire, her voice was tight, we need to talk. About what? About your grandmother's will. She's leaving everything to you. I know. That's not fair. Madison is her granddaughter, too. Madison never tried to have a relationship with her. Because we told her not to. Exactly. You kept Madison from her, and now you're upset about the consequences. You poisoned her against us. I told her the truth. There's a difference. She's leaving you everything. The house, the money, everything. That should be split between you and Madison. Grandmother can leave her estate to whoever she wants. That's her right. You're being selfish. No, I'm being honest. Madison made her choices. She stole from me, plagiarized my work, got expelled for academic fraud. Why would grandmother leave anything to someone like that? Silence. Then, you've changed. Yes, I agreed. I have. I stopped letting you and Madison walk all over me. You used to be such a good girl. I used to be a doormat. Now I'm a person. If you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine. She hung up on me. I smiled and went back to packing for college. September arrived and I moved into my dorm at Northwestern. My grandmother, Jake's family, and Jake himself all helped me move in. We decorated my room, set up my desk, made it feel like home. Jake was going to school nearby, Columbia College Chicago, studying film and photography. We'd be close enough to visit on weekends. My parents hadn't called. Madison hadn't reached out. I'd heard through the grapevine that she was working retail and living at home trying to get her GED. Her social media had gone dark. Her friends had moved on. Tyler was dating someone else. Everything that had happened to me in my first life was now happening to her, and I felt no guilt about it, because she'd made her choices. She'd stolen and lied and sabotaged. She'd hurt me deliberately, systematically, for years, and now she was facing the natural consequences of her actions. I, on the other hand, was thriving. My classes were challenging and exciting. I joined the art club and the literary magazine. I made friends, real friends, who liked me for me. I started painting again, creating new work that was wholly mine. Jake visited every weekend and we explored Chicago together. We went to museums and galleries and concerts. We talked about art and photography and our dreams for the future. I called my grandmother every Sunday. She was healthy and happy and full of stories. She told me about her latest paintings, about her book club, about her garden. We were building the relationship we should have had all along. In October, I entered a piece in a student art show and won first place. The painting, a self-portrait that showed me rising from ashes, was featured in the school paper. Someone from a local gallery saw it and asked if I'd be interested in showing more work. I said yes. By November, I had my first solo show scheduled for the spring. My grandmother flew in for the opening and she bought 3 pieces. Other collectors bought the rest. I sold out completely. The local paper did a feature on me, rising star in Chicago art scene. They mentioned I was just a freshman, that I'd overcome family adversity to pursue my dreams. They didn't mention Madison by name, but anyone who'd followed the plagiarism scandal could read between the lines. My phone buzzed the day the article came out. It was Madison. "Congratulations," her text read. "I hope you're happy." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, "I am, thank you." I didn't hear from her again. Christmas came and I spent it with my grandmother and Jake's family. My parents had invited me home, but I declined. I had no interest in spending the holidays with people who'd never valued me. My grandmother gave me a set of professional art supplies and a key to her house. "So, you can visit anytime," she said, even when I'm not there. Consider it your home, too. Jake gave me a photo book he'd made, a year's worth of pictures of us together, from prom night to present day. Every page showed me smiling, laughing, living, being happy. "This is who you really are," he said when I started crying over it. "Not the girl your family tried to make you, but the person you chose to become." I graduated Northwestern in 3 years instead of 4, double majoring in art and business. I was accepted into RSD's graduate program with a full fellowship. My work was shown in galleries across Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. Jake's documentary about young artists, which featured me prominently, won awards at film festivals. We moved in together after graduation, finding a perfect apartment with good light for my studio and his darkroom. My grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep the summer I turned 23, exactly when I died in my first life. She left me everything, just as she'd promised: the house, the money, the art collection. It was enough to secure my future, to ensure I'd never have to struggle the way I had before. She also left a letter. "Claire, you brought joy to my last years. You were brave, enough to reach out, honest enough to tell the truth, strong enough to stand up for yourself. I'm so proud of who you've become. Live well, my darling girl. Make beautiful things. Be happy." I framed that letter and hung it in my studio. My parents contested the will, of course. Madison joined their lawsuit, claiming she deserved half the inheritance. They lost. The will was ironclad, and I had documentation of years of abuse and estrangement. The judge ruled in my favor, and my family was ordered to pay my legal fees. That was the last time I heard from them. I'm 25 now. I have a successful career as an artist. I'm engaged to Jake, who still looks at me like I'm the most interesting person in the world. We're planning a small wedding next spring. Just close friends and chosen family. I'm happy. Genuinely, deeply, lastingly happy. And Madison? Last I heard, she was still living with our parents, working dead-end retail jobs, trying to build a life from the ruins of her reputation. She never went to college. She never pursued art. She never achieved any of the success she'd stolen from me. Sometimes I think about her, about what might have been different if she'd chosen kindness over cruelty, honesty over theft. But those thoughts are fleeting and without regret. She made her choices. I made mine. She chose to tear me down. I chose to build myself up. She chose to steal and lie. I chose to create and tell the truth. She chose to destroy. I chose to thrive. In my first life, she won. She got everything while I got nothing. In this life, my real life, my second chance, I won. I got everything I deserved, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of. And I did it all in flat shoes and a simple black dress, while Madison stumbled and fell in heels that were never meant for her. The revenge wasn't in her broken ankle or her ruined reputation or her lost opportunities. The revenge was in me succeeding, in me being happy, in me living well, because living well isn't just the best revenge, it's the only revenge that really matters, and I'm living very, very well indeed.